What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Meek, the Uber Geek. Thank you very much for joining me here on Pretty Dece, your daily entertainment and pop culture podcast. Very happy that you are here. Happy if you are in the Anchor app, if you're in the podcast, or if you are watching on YouTube. You can find that by searching for Pretty Dece on YouTube. We got some news today that something from at least me growing up and anyone my age growing up is coming to an end, and that is the Warped Tour. If if you're my age and if you have been into kind of alternative music, punk music at all, you definitely know what Warped Tour is. And at this point, it's just kind of a part of pop culture. You've probably heard of Warped Tour if you're kind of anywhere around this age. It was essentially this like traveling punk rock alternative music festival that went all across the country. So it had tons and tons of stops every single summer, and it was just this big, huge traveling festival that was very popular with the kids. Obviously, the unlike a lot of music festivals like Lollapalooza, stuff like that, the demographic, kind of the target demographic for Warped Tour was very young. They were aiming for bands that quote unquote the kids were into. And according to Kevin Lyman, he's been the producer of the Warped Tour for 24 years now, its entire lifespan, 24 years. Next year, the 2018 tour will be the last time that it actually does the full across the country tour. The name won't be going away at least until the 25th anniversary in 2019, but they won't be doing the full country tour. So I would imagine maybe they're doing one or two different locations, maybe just one, just to say that they made it the full 25 years. This is it's kind of a big thing, right? Like Warped Tour has been a big, huge name in the music industry and kind of, just in the zeitgeist in pop culture for a really long time now, for honestly the majority of my life here. And a lot of the bands that I grew up listening to made it big on Warped Tour, had their first tours on Warped Tour, and Warped Tour kind of like ballooned into the massive, huge thing that it was, kind of while I was getting more and more and more into music. So in a weird way, like my love of music and Warped Tour kind of followed the same path with each other. And things have dipped recently, according to an interview with Kevin Lyman in the past couple years. Apparently last year there was kind of a dip in ticket sales. People still came out to the show, but the very telling thing apparently was that the average age of the Warped Tour attendee went up. It was like 19, where before it had been kind of 3 years below that. So, he found himself looking around in the shows, just wondering, like, where are the, like, 14 to 17-year-old demographic that they were so strong in before? Like, where did the kids go? And he wondered, like, was it the bands that he booked? Was he just kind of out of touch and not getting what the kids were into? But, he was looking at the success of bands that he booked, and they were doing very well. And, it was just that kids, that people that age weren't coming out to the shows, weren't making the effort to go out and see bands and to go to a music festival like that. And there's a lot of really interesting musings about why that might be in this particular interview that he does. Every generation will complain about the previous generation, right? Every generation will say, well, kids these days, they just don't get it. Or, kids these days, well, they don't understand X. They won't do Y. And that's something that I always try to avoid. I think in general, once you start saying kids these days, you're out of touch. You just don't get it, and you become kind of part of the problem, really. I think it's always interesting to look and see how trends are happening and look and see like why maybe it seems like the kids are doing what they're doing, because certainly trends can change for sure, but just kind of lumping all kids into something bad I think is a bad idea. But, there's an interesting article written that is referenced here in this interview that Kevin Lyman did, talking about the fact that, the trend seems to be that kids don't want to go out anymore to something like the Warped Tour. And the article kind of snarkily talks about, well, they want to stay in their rooms and watch Netflix. And while that's partly true, I think that the watching Netflix part of that is very telling. When Warp Tour started in 1995, the internet was a tiny, tiny little thing. Most people didn't really have it. Getting out and going seeing those bands, it was like this huge, crazy social thing, and it was the one time you got to experience that stuff. Cut to 2017 into 2018 here, you have your socialization can take place on the internet. I mean, there's less need to go out and be in a giant like-minded group of people like you, because you can maybe get that on the internet. You can hang out with those people on Twitter. You can hang out in forums and chat rooms and Facebook and whatever, Tumblr. So I don't think it's necessarily that, well, kids just aren't social, because that's definitely the case. They're still there. It's just an interesting change in habits. And you also, of course, get the added benefit of, like, now we have YouTube, and you can go watch live performances of any band that you want ever. So I wonder a little bit too if that's not keeping some people away from live music now. It's maybe easier if I just sit at my computer and watch it, rather than actually go through the trouble of going out and going to see it. I think one of the other big things too is just, tastes have changed. I think that when I was younger, I think that more people, more kids my age were into alternative music than it seems like kids are now. I think that genres have expanded, and there's a lot more options for kids, and you definitely see a lot more kids into hip hop, into EDM, not that there's anything wrong with any of those genres. I think more musical genres is always awesome. I love people exploring and being creative in different ways, and finding new ways to express themselves in a musical form. I think that maybe it does lend itself to being a little bit of trouble when your music festival focuses around a genre that maybe its popularity is dwindling just a smidge. So I think all those things kind of came together, and I've kind of signaled the death knell, unfortunately, for Warped Tour. No matter how much I still love punk music, and no matter how much I still love a lot of the bands that grew up on Warped Tour, things don't last forever, unfortunately. Uh, I do really respect Kevin Lyman. He's gone through, he's been a very public face of Warped Tour for a really long time, and it's mentioned in this article, like, why didn't you expand Warped Tour out to include other genres, like stuff that you saw that was popular, like, EDM's getting big, why didn't you expand into that? And, I think that he maybe saw that as, like, selling out a little bit. And I can respect the idea of, like, I started this as a punk festival. I had a vision for it. That's the music that I like. And, like, just moving into a genre because it's popular, that doesn't ring true with people. Like, if you don't actually enjoy that stuff, and you're just doing it to try to get people there, I think that people know when that's the case. So I can really respect that that's not a direction that they took with Warped Tour. He was also asked about, like, why didn't you just sell the brand? Like, people, I guess, have approached him about selling the Warped Tour brand. And he said, that's not something that he wanted to do. He didn't want to send Warped Tour out without him. It was a thing that he put together, kind of like poured his heart into. I didn't want to just see it kind of go and morph and become kind of its own other thing. So, pour one out for what was basically punk rock summer camp for the last 24 years. Lots of people performed at Warped Tour. People like Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, of course, people who aren't even punk, like Katy Perry, Eminem, the Black Eyed Peas. Countless bands have appeared on Warped Tour, and Warped Tour has really, I think, has done a lot of positive stuff, both with, like, exposing people to new music, getting bands who maybe wouldn't have been able to do a nationwide tour to tour the nation and get them out there and get them exposed to people. And they've also done a lot of good work with, charities and organizations that they bring along, that they expose these kids to. And, some number of these kids who've gone to these shows have gotten involved with really awesome organizations and charities, and continue to this day. So, an overall net positive, very much a net positive for Warped Tour's impact, I think, on this country. So definitely pour one out for the Warped Tour. So that's going to do it today for Pretty Dece. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. Make sure you like Pretty Dece on Facebook, facebook.com/Pretty Dece Show. Follow me on Twitter at Pretty Dece Show. Of course, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, which you can do by searching for Pretty Dece on YouTube. So we'll be back tomorrow. Again, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a daily episode.